Hello! Welcome to the second week of my vlog. Today I'm going to go through some of my ideas that I've had since the previous vlog, and then I'm going to go into the materials that I've chosen to study this semester to put in the elements and have them weather.
So I wanted to start this video with some thoughts that I've had since the previous video. So this studio examines the post-occupied. So there's this point in time when an occupant moves into what would typically be called a finished building, and post-occupied is concerned with the time after that. And we have begun this semester examining materials. We've been looking at how they age, and we've been trying to see what stories they can tell. But I would like to address that the timeline for these materials begins long before the building is occupied. I think it is valuable when examining the post-occupied not to forget its context within the greater timeline. Materials often have stories that date back long before the occupant moves into the building. This could be like marble or granite, formed underground over hundreds and thousands of years. Or it could be wood that shows its growth through annual rings. You can see how old it was and when the rough winters, bad storms, or forest fires were. That story could also be that of the human hand. It could be the craftsmanship of construction or lack thereof. It could even be the celebration of human imperfection. It could also be something like the pattern of the formwork on the concrete. Lastly, these materials could come from another project, a recycled product of another post-occupied, post-demolished building. This is just to say that it is not a clear timeline for a building, but rather an assemblage and disassemblage of materials over time. This is not to say that this semester should cover all that territory, but if we're pursuing the stories that materials can tell, I think there is a value in examining their full life cycle. So what about the life of a building? Should every building be used forever, simply being preserved and maintained, occasionally renovated? Should we then design buildings to be adaptable for future generations to update? Perhaps building as simple and as durable as possible with an emphasis on timeless style. Or should we design buildings to decay into the ground, the materials simply being borrowed from nature for a period of time? This semester, I decided to study the weathering of wood. I began my search with a trip to Rockler, a carpentry shop near Pittsburgh. They were very interested in my project and gave me lots of great advice. They helped me obtain white oak, Spanish cedar, mahogany, and teak. They then sent me to Home Depot to purchase pine. I purchased some common white pine and then got to cutting. Alright, so let's go through the types of wood that I acquired. We'll begin with Spanish cedar, which isn't actually a true cedar. It's actually more closely related to mahogany. But the guys at Rockler advised to use Spanish cedar as opposed to red cedar because it does much better outdoors. It's quite durable against moisture and is also naturally unattractive to termites. As far as pricing, this was the third most expensive wood I purchased, and it comes from South and Central America. Next, we have African mahogany. It's a tropical hardwood, and it's typically used for furniture. It's somewhat durable outside and isn't the most attractive to insects. This was the fourth most expensive wood that I purchased. Next, we have white oak. This is the hardest wood I purchased. Due to how hard it is very durable. It is more difficult for insects to bore than softer woods. White oak is native to the east coast of the US and is probably the most common tree around Pittsburgh. This was the second most expensive wood that I purchased. Next, we have white pine. It's a coniferous softwood. It is very cheap and very accessible, which has made it common for construction purposes. It's attractive to insects due to its softness. As far as construction purposes, it's usually pressure treated, which makes it pretty much insect proof, but for what I'm doing, it is not pressure treated. White pine is native to the northeast US and Canada. The last wood I got is teak. It's commonly used on boats for its resistance to moisture. It is very, very rot resistant and also very insect proof. Louis Kahn used it at Salk Institute, which was famously right above the Pacific Ocean, so got hit with a lot of salt water. It's grown in Southeast Asia, and it is very expensive, the most expensive of the woods that I purchased. So the first finish that I wanted to explore was the charring of wood. Charring the wood burns off cellulose, which is what insects and fungi feed on. Cellulose is also the most flammable part of wood, so once you've burned that, it's harder for the wood to catch fire in the future. The last benefit is it makes the surface less absorbent and thus more resistant to moisture. So this was a shallow char of pine. Here you can kind of see how it brings out the grain. And then this one is going to be a deep char. You start to get this crocodile skin effect. The woods that work best for this tend to be the soft and porous ones because the heat can get deeper more quickly. The hardwoods tend to warp more as well when you do this than softer woods do. I chose to do this with pine and cedar. Pine was a very attractive wood due to how cheap it is and how accessible it is. It's a fun challenge to see what kind of cool effects you can produce with such a cheap wood. So now this one is the cedar, which cedar is traditionally used for the Japanese yakasugi. However, they used a Japanese red cedar, whereas this is a Spanish cedar. And here you can see again how it accentuates the grain of the wood. So the next part of the yakasugi process is using a wire brush to remove the excess charcoal from the charred boards. And I really like the effect this had. It really softened the imperfections and inconsistencies of the burning. And here is the brushing of the Spanish cedar. The effect wasn't as significant as it was with the pine. This one didn't change that much. So the next finish I wanted to explore is bleaching wood. At Rockler, they recommended I use this pure oxalic acid. There were a lot of safety concerns with this product, so I had to be pretty careful. Oxalic acid is good for removing stains, so it's typically used when restoring old wood that has been stained. I was hoping this would produce a whitewashed effect on the wood, however, it didn't have a very significant effect. Regardless, I think it will be interesting to see how it ages in comparison to unbleached oak. When it comes to finishing wood for outdoor use, spar varnish is very durable and has the necessary flexibility to handle expansion and contraction. For every variety of wood I have, I wanted to make sure I have one varnished and one unfinished to see the contrast between them. We've come a long way, so I thought it was good to reflect on where we started and now look at where we are. And once more where we started and where we are.
Alright, so we are all done with the cutting, and the sanding, and the burning, and the bleaching, and the varnishing, and now they've all been mounted on this white piece of plywood, where they will sit on my porch to weather for the duration of the semester. I've just put them out here today, and I've already had multiple neighbors stopping by to ask about the project, and they're all very excited to see how these materials will weather over the course of the next few months. So, thanks for watching my vlog, and I'll see you next time.